and welcome to this episode of our Thriving Tribe Zoom Room sessions. I'm David Francis Moore.
I'm Juliette Harvey.
And today we are with Bernadette Kiely, who's a visual artist. Bernadette, thank you so much for joining us today on the Zoom Room sessions.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking me. I'm a visual artist. Predominantly, I work as a painter and drawing and a subsidiary in photography and video. But my main practice is painting and drawing. It probably took me about 10 years from when I started painting full time to actually, we'll say, not even realize it, but proclaim that I was in fact an artist, that I could feel that I was actually reasonably good enough to put my work out there and call myself an artist. So from a professional point of view, it would have been when I entered art exhibitions and competitions. Like, for example, the first big one I was in was the Guinness Peak Aviation Awards for Emerging Artists, and that ran for a number of years. So I think once I was included in that, that sort of told me I'm a professional now. But I didn't ever consciously think that thought. When I started as a painter, I didn't really have any goals and ambitions in terms of a career. I started painting and drawing at home. I had done a degree in graphic design already, graphic design communications, but I had always drawn and always painted myself, regardless of what I was doing. So I just kept that going, and I didn't look too far into the future. I mainly looked at what I was doing and how I could actually make the painting and how I could learn how to paint. So in a way, it's almost always been a learning process. And so if I do this, then I'll move on to the next thing. And I suppose along the way, once I did start exhibiting, I did give thought to the kinds of exhibitions I would like my work to be included in. It feels fine. It feels fine now because it's really what I feel I am. And in a way, if I can just go back slightly to before that previous question, I have been really drawing and painting since I was a child, like a small child. I can remember sort of 4 years of age. So as far as I'm concerned now, I was always an artist. Both my parents made a lot of drawings and paintings and stuff as well. So, but in a way it was always going to be what I was going to do. And my mother and father knew that even when I left school. So they knew I was going to art college. I knew I was going to art college. So how does it make me feel being an artist? I don't ever really think about how does it make me feel, but it probably makes me feel somewhat freer than I would if I called myself something else, you know? I mean, I did teach for quite a long time, as a lot of artists would. So when you're teaching, it's a much more structured environment that you have to be in. So yeah, I'd say that's probably a reasonable answer. It makes me realize that I have the freedom to do pretty much as I want in my environment of the studio. Well, I have a studio at the house, a big studio, and all my work goes on in there pretty much. So I always have work on the go that I'm working at, and I basically make bodies of work, and I go from one exhibition to the next, really, with hopefully a good gap in between that gives me the time to make the work. So whatever I'm working on is what gets me up, you know, and makes me feel excited about it. And that sometimes, because the studio is attached to the house, I can actually go in there when I come down the stairs in the morning and have a look at what I've done last night and see what's happened, you know. So it's that. I'm very lucky to have the space I have. I may have told you before, it was built by Barry Cook, the artist who lived here previous to me. And it's in a handball alley. So it's the size of an old handball alley, 20 foot by 30 or more, 30 by 40 maybe. I've narrowed it a bit. And it's great to have it. And the more space that I would have, the more I'd fill it. And in fact, I wish I had a warehouse space sometimes, you know, because you can move around freely. If you've ever seen pictures of like de Kooning studio, ginormous, but there's stuff everywhere. So no matter where you go, you're going to fill your space. But having said that, I don't think it's essential. I don't think it's essential to have a big space, because when I did start painting, it was in the house I lived in. And when I put my baby daughter to bed at 8 o'clock, I'd start working then in really a space that was no bigger than the bathroom, you know. And I set it all up so that I could work and make actually very big, long pieces in that small space. And I grew up working at the kitchen table. And now, because of the lockdown, and I've seen on, you know, Facebook and Instagram, artists are actually having to work at their kitchen table. And that's something I love doing, you know. So while I do think it's obviously great, and if you're making big work or you do need a big space to make it in, but in order to create, from my point of view, draw, paint, even make little, you know, objects, all you need is the space in front of you and whatever you need to work with, pencils or papers or knives or whatever. I think it has massively, actually, because I know that no matter where I am, and I have been, say, on residencies where you're given a studio, but it wouldn't be anything as big as my studio, you know. Or even, say, if I went to stay somewhere for a while, I wouldn't have anywhere to work. You know, there'd be no studios. So I would always set up on the kitchen table, and I'd move it from wherever it was. So I'd put it near a window or something, you know. So I always know that it doesn't really, and also I've worked from my car. I had a van, so I had a smallish van, and then I got a bigger one, but there was sliding doors. So I actually made a series of drawings from outdoors in Donegal and in North Mayo. So I would just set up like all my paints and materials in the van, and just decide where I was going and just go there and work outdoors. And my husband made an easel for me at the time, and so I was able to set that up. So in a way, I think restrictions that people put on themselves and space is just in there. Now, I know that you do need, obviously, stuff, materials, but you can actually make work with very little. And it has informed my drawing and how I go about doing things. I'm not a great fan of a place in a way, being a centre of production. And now I do feel really sad for artists that I know at the moment who can't get into their studios because of the lockdown. But they're all really inventive. I mean, being an artist means you should be creative. If you're not, get another job, you know, and come up with a way of doing it. If you really want to make art, you're going to make it in the toilet, you know, like anywhere, you know. Well, I haven't ever collaborated with another artist on a project, other than I've made drawings for poetry books. You know, Gallery Press was one of them. But I would do that myself, and then they would coordinate it. So I mightn't even meet the poet, you know. I've done that maybe 4 or 5 times. But I haven't ever had anybody working in the studio with me, and I've never worked in a shared studio apart from college. So that's not something I would do. The other thing is, I do work with gallerists, so we'd be back and forth whenever there'd be an exhibition, but often it would be on email, occasionally the phone, and sometimes you'd go there. If it was a big gallery space, you'd go up and come back. But again, it's not really a collaboration. It's there facilitating your exhibition, you know. So it's something I would be quite interested in doing, actually, to see how it would go in the future. But you're probably talking about networks as well. So I mean, ever since social media arrived in 2009, Facebook, I mean, every artist in the world seems to be on them pretty much, and Instagram. So there's a big shared community now on social media of artists, I suppose, from where we're located in the world. A lot of EU, UK and Irish artists would know each other and would have met each other online. And then sometimes you meet them at your exhibition or their exhibition. And that's been absolutely fantastic, you know. And before that, you would just meet your peers at exhibitions, maybe, you know. You know, what I do sell my work, and the galleries sell it for me. So without them, it would have been more difficult. Definitely, they create a space for you to exhibit your work. They do the background work, and so that you can show your work. And I mean, every artist wants their work to be seen, you know. Every musician wants their songs to be heard. So they really do perform a great service, you know, a fantastic service for artists. And obviously it's their career as well. So I do think they're really very important, you know, and how they go about it. I mean, even if it's through social media or online, at least there's a vehicle for a body who are professional and professionally trained to show your work to people that I personally, as an artist who's just working in my studio, would never get to see or never get to meet, you know. And now a lot of artists, you do have to network in a way, especially in this country, because if you're not visible, well, you're just not visible, you know. So it is something that artists do take on, but quite reluctantly, really. It's almost like it's something, oh, you better do that in order for this to happen, or you have to meet so-and-so and you have to meet so-and-so. And you do meet them, you know, and they're all great. But so in a way, it's kind of part of the job, you know. The administration's part of the job, networking is part of the job, and in a way, social media has made it easier. If I was paid for my administrative roles, what the administration that I do myself, I would earn a lot of money, you know, because I do an awful lot of administration myself, and that's probably just a personal thing, because I actually was lucky to work in the Butler Gallery at the beginning of my career, so I learned the gallery trade from the other side, if you like, you know. So I know what needs to be done. So I'm lucky, very lucky in that respect. But I do value the administrative work that I do personally, but I just see it as part of something that I have to do in order to get my work out where I want it to go. It would be great if I had someone else doing it for me all the time. Gosh, that's kind of hard to think about in a way. I mean, entrepreneurs, I suppose in my mind, an entrepreneur is somebody who comes up with ideas and then maybe starts a business around it. I suppose to think about it in a way as somebody who's running their own business. Effectively, I'm running my own business. And I organize myself through the PRSI system and all that because I'm running my own business. So I would see myself then probably as an entrepreneur, but I suppose I see entrepreneurship as maybe somebody who does an awful lot of different things and comes up with and buys dozens of hotels and, you know, that kind of thing. So from my point of view, I wouldn't really see myself as an entrepreneur in the description that I have in my own head, you know. But I do see probably other artists who would be well known, America in particular. For example, if I can name an artist's name, like Jeff Koons, for example, in New York, who would run effectively a factory, and Damien Hirst as well in the UK. So, and also coming up with lots of ideas of ways to disseminate their work. That, I would probably see that as entrepreneurship, the way I think about it. And that just makes me think about artists of the past, like Turner and, you know, maybe Rembrandt, who would have produced an enormous amount of etchings, for example, and prints in order to get their work out there. So a lot of artists do that and produce prints and multiples and everything. So in a way, that's a form of entrepreneurship. It's just a little different and kind of entrepreneurship, I think, it wouldn't be a word that would be used really, I would imagine, by artists to describe themselves, you know. That's why I've got a bit of a hard time with it. But if I think about it, I could be described, I suppose, or an artist's practice could be described as entrepreneurship. And the wider it gets, maybe the more it could be described like that. I think it would depend on what you were producing. Like, I'm producing paintings and drawings, which do have a wide, I won't say remit, but they do go quite far afield out of this country as well. But to consider myself as an entrepreneur, I don't think I would do that, because it would put something in my mind that would turn me into more of a producer rather than an artist. Now, that's not to say if I think more about this in the future, I might think about it differently. But from this moment in time, I think if you see yourself as an entrepreneur, then you probably see yourself as more of a machine. that's maybe more into quicker, faster, producing more, and making a lot of money. So that's in a way how I would see it, where from my point of view, I'm working because I love doing what I'm doing. And obviously I need money to survive, but money isn't my driver. You know, if I was a fully fledged entrepreneur, I think money might be my driver, you know. I think it does really here. Yeah. Now I have to say I'm very lucky. I think now it does in this present time that we're in 2020, and probably has done maybe for a number of years, maybe 20 years. I think when I was younger, it was a lot more difficult because artists weren't seen as, well, they weren't seen as good kind of, well, you couldn't even get a loan from a bank if you were an artist, you know. They weren't seen as, we'll say, valuable contributors to society. And in a way, they are seen, on the one hand they are, and on the other hand they're not still. So for example, if you're a mathematician or a scientist or someone who's going to come up with the vaccine, well then you'll be considered a very highly thought of member of society. So the arts obviously are well thought of in a kind of a public arena, as like Ireland is known for its arts, its writers, its musicians, and its visual artists, not so much, but they're there. So I think, yeah, probably because of where I live and I'm sort of outside of I'm on the periphery really, I can exist very well here and people know what I do, but they just leave me alone. So that's a kind of very basic level. But I suppose as a general thing, I'm thinking in terms of the government and how the current government treats artists and doesn't actually value them only as kind of quotation material when they're going to New York for St. Patrick's Day or something. So I suppose from that point of view, I mean, there has been a huge outcry over the amount of money that was given to artists, for example, during this crisis, and encouraged to produce artwork within 13 days or something, which was like a ludicrous suggestion, really. So you could see very much from that, even though people do pay lip service to artists and think they're wonderful, they're still not really valued, you know, as kind of fully, I suppose, paid up members of society. And that's probably because what artists do, well, I mean, they try and quantify it, you know, it's not quantifiable, you know. So you can't just sit, well, you can, I mean, you can make designs and illustrations and anything like that, but it's only going to be at a certain level and it's going to be of a certain type. So I think in a way, and I'll just say musicians, writers, artists, and we can see it very much because of this crisis, whereas musicians especially have lost all their gigs and they can't make any money. And unless they're rich already, I know lots of musicians who have absolutely nothing. And because maybe they weren't, I suppose their income may have not been taxable, they don't exist, you know. So I think I probably, because of where I live, is actually very important that I have had this in my head, and also I've been lucky that really, as a general rule, artists are not anything as valued as they should be. I remember being in Denmark. I did an exhibition in Denmark. Now, it was a long time ago. Amelia was only about 6. It was 20 years ago, nearly. And I was really struck by how they treated their artists. And Denmark's a small country as well, a good bit smaller than here, I think. And every town had their own museum. And the curator gave me the book of all the museums in the whole country, and it was absolutely beautiful. And they all had their own artists. And I remember there was original art on the trains. And she told me that every teenager in Holland or in Denmark, they all had a favorite artist. Same, they had their favorite musician, their favorite writer, their favorite visual artist as well, their favorite painter, sculptor, whatever. And I remember, that is amazing. That's the way I'd like Ireland to be. And it's not. No way. And that was 20 years ago. And you'd probably utilize a lot of them in one day, you know, just kind of juggling everything all the time. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I have 2 daughters who are both grown up now, but when they were small, well, when the first little girl was gone to play school, I worked when she was gone. I came home, I didn't clean the kitchen or anything, I just worked. And then when she came home, I was there. And then when she went to bed, I'd start working. So if I could start before 9, I could keep going until say 12 or 1, and I was fine. And then when my second daughter was born, I actually lived here then, and I had the big studio. So I used to actually have her in her little buggy in the corner of the studio with the cover, and, you know, just, I was nervous of the oil paint. And then when they went to school, I worked around them. So I had myself quite organized. As soon as I came back, I would work. And then gradually they went to secondary school, and so I could work. And now I was teaching as well, so there was always 1 day a week I had to go there and have childcare. But I wanted to be my own childcare person, if you know what I mean. And because I always had the studio at the house, I could do that. So even when they were bigger and they came home and I was working in the studio, well, they knew I was there and I could come out then, you know. And then when they were playing with their friends, I could work. So I worked around them, and until they left home, and then I did go on some residencies even when they were younger, and their dad minded them, so that was fine. And financially, I did teaching. I also did graphic design jobs that I was given. I used to write for magazines, so I'd be paid to write articles, take photographs to go with the articles. So I did a bit of that as well. So just to make money. So I was teaching for a long time, and I decided if I stopped teaching and put the amount of effort that I put into the teaching, preparing projects, all the rest of it, into trying to get my work into galleries and get my work sold and seen, it should work. So I did that, and it did. You know, I won't say instantly, but I put all the time then into administration that I was putting into the teaching. So I suppose I'm pretty disciplined. I see working in the studio, I see it's my full-time job. So like everybody, I go to work, you know, and you do not so much now, but you used to always hear things, oh, well, you just work when you feel like it, or when the muse strikes you. There's no such thing, really. No, I go to work the same as everybody else. You know, I open the door and I go in. It's just, I'm my own boss. So I can decide if I need to do something else. I can do it, you know. So I suppose I've put pretty disciplined structures on myself. And I definitely would say myself, I am a self-motivator. And I even though I have worked with other people and worked in office jobs, I knew it wasn't something that I wanted to pursue. I pretty much want to be doing my own thing, you know, and but you do have to put structures in place, definitely, you know, otherwise it's not going to happen. You have to treat it as a job and go to it. You know, now you might work late, but it's still your job. You're at work. Ability to juggle a lot of things at the same time. Keep a lot of information in my head. That would go with that. Organized thinking, so that in a way I'm able to compartmentalize my thoughts. So if I have to do something like go shopping or pay a bill, I don't think about it until I have to, which serves me very well. It mightn't serve other people that well at times, but so I suppose organized thinking, ability to see ahead, to think ahead, and I suppose just get up and do whatever, you know, not think about it, go and do it. The ability to do, yeah, just to kind of get to it. I had to put the structures in place, you know, so that I valued my time, because I just did value my time, because I know how much time I have to put into doing what I do. But in order for the people that I lived with to value my time, I did have to talk about it on occasions. And I did have a few typed sheets attached to my door. And one time I had one up that said something like, don't call me unless somebody dies, you know? That was for my daughter, my older daughter, who used to kind of walk in and out whenever she felt like it. So I had to say, I'm at work. And she understood it, but it took a while, you know. And there would have been things like that because the space is attached to the house, it can be seen as if you're there and available. Whereas it's different if the studio was somewhere else and I had to go to it. Well, then I just wouldn't be there, you know. So I think because it was in the house, I did, and I have heard other artists saying they can't get anything done when they're at home. But there's a door, there's two doors. So a few signs went up at times, just I'm at work and, you know, don't call me at all. You know, things like that. Yeah. From the art point of view, I think, do you know the Visual Artists Ireland? You do. They're doing a really good job, actually. and they have been for a number of years, where they have talks for artists. They have financial people who talk about taxes and how to operate as an artist. They have how to negotiate the art world, how to get your work into galleries, how to carve out time for yourself. All the things that I suppose, because of the age I am, I had to do for myself. And now there are workshops. I mean, there's mentors that you can go and listen to, and they'll help you pretty much with anything, you know. So I think if the universities were to have a look at that model, and Noel Kelly and the people who work there, I think they would learn a lot and get a lot of information. But I'm going to insert a little caveat there, because while I do think it is helpful, and I think a lot of artists benefit from it, I still think that there's quite a lot of times when it's better to have to negotiate things on your own and to figure out how to think creatively yourself. The fact that there are people there that you can go to is great, you know. So I think that, just to answer your question, I would say, just at this juncture in time, have a look at what the VAI are doing, because they're doing it very well for artists. There's an awful lot about government funding for artists. And now I know it's for projects, you know, certain projects. And while I definitely am supportive of, obviously, to go back to your question about how the arts, or say visual artists, are valued, it doesn't have to be monetarily, you know, whereas people tend to think that, for example, if you hang your piece of art on the wall or present it and it costs a lot of money, that it's good. So I think that sort of translates into how artists are valued. If they're famous, if they've had a hit single, they're good, regardless of whether they are good or not, you know. So I think it can be the same with artists, that sometimes artists do get a lot of money and a lot of funding, and they're not necessarily the best artists, you know. They just are good at getting a lot of funding, and their work suits a certain type of, you know, whatever. So I think sometimes artists get caught up in the idea that, oh, I've no funding, so I can't do anything, which would bring me back to the kitchen table. If you want to do it, you're going to do it, you know. And I remember reading something, well, it was the UK, but I think it's probably general, that 1 out of every 300 art students continue, now I will say, making art themselves as a career, rather than going into design or other forms of art, you know. And it's difficult, and that's in a way what makes it what it is, you know. Not that it's unique or special, but it gives its unique and special qualities.
This has been Zoom Room Sessions as part of our Thrive and Thrive project. This has been Bernadette Kiely. Bernadette, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Thanks. If people want to find out more information on your work, where can they find that?
Well, I do have a new website. It's bernadettekiely.ie.
Okay.
And I'm also on the Taylor Galleries website, which is Taylor Galleries, I think it's .ie as well.
Well, brilliant. Yeah. Bernadette, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, thank you.